So body focused repetitive behaviors are essentially anytime your brain is using your body to cope in a repetitive way. So the examples or the ones that live under body focused repetitive behaviors are hair pulling, skin picking, and nail biting are sort of the most commonly known. Then there's also cheek biting, lip picking, finger picking, feet picking. Again, anywhere where you're using your hands or your body to self-soothe. And the definition in the psychological diagnostic manuals are basically the repetitive behavior, repeated attempts to stop, not definable by any other condition, and debilitation in the form of, the physical damage of the bald spots from overpulling, or the skin infections from overpicking, or bloody fingernails from over nail biting, that starts to create shame and starts to impede living your best life.
And today I've got a very special guest. We actually spoke to her about 6 months ago, and today is going to be my opportunity to flesh out some of the topics we brought about last time. So one of the core missions we have on the Live the Path podcast is to bring to light and have conversations with people that lead truly out of the box exceptional lives. We say lives of purpose, passion, and joy. And one such person that I encountered quite fortunately is Anila Idnani. If you don't know anything about Anila, and I don't know how that's possible, but if you haven't heard of her, I would direct you to her TED Talk. That's where I first became familiar with her. She did that, I think, back in 2019. And she talks in that 11 minutes about a topic that is a source of shame for a lot of us, and a topic that I just watched her in that 11 minutes transition from that place of shame and keeping things covered up to a place of strength. And that was what piqued my interest about her, and I had to have her on this podcast. So also you can listen to our previous episode, which was back in November, to define some of these things that we're going to be bringing up today. Anila, it's great to have you again. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
I'm so floored to be here, and just the way that you introduced, this is not how I think of myself. So the way that you introduced me, I'm like, whoa. I feel like a rush of emotion of in the sense of wow, my life is making a difference for people. The way that you just sort of see me, I don't know, it feels a little overwhelming in a sense of wow, I didn't realize that that's maybe what people do see when they see. I don't even know what I'm talking about right now. Just thank you for allowing me to be here, for the opportunity to be here. I am feeling a little flustered right now by that intro, to be honest, because, it's just me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
well, I didn't mean it all to fluster you. You are, I think you strike a chord with a certain group of people, certain people that share a lot with you. And I'm certainly one of those. So I truly do see you, and I really appreciate the work that you do. I don't at all take it for granted. So I'm not trying to flatter you. It's just, it's how I feel. And it's the reason I felt compelled to bring you on, because I don't think we finished a lot of the topics we started last time.
100%. I feel like that interview was yesterday and it could have gone for hours. So I'm glad to be back to see what's come up for you in the last 6 months and share what's come up with me in the last 6 months to hopefully help whoever's listening to live the path right now.
Wonderful. We're going to be describing this topic, so we might as well just take a quick minute to talk about it. This BFRB, which I think stands for Body Focused Repetitive Behaviors. That term, if you could just take a minute or so just to review what that is for people that aren't already familiar with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just the caveat that I'm not a mental health treatment professional, but these are mental health conditions. So body-focused repetitive behaviors are essentially anytime your brain is using your body to cope in a repetitive way. So the examples or the ones that live under body focused repetitive behaviors are hair pulling, skin picking, and nail biting are sort of the most commonly known. Then there's also cheek biting, lip picking, finger picking, feet picking. Again, anywhere where you're using your hands or your body to self-soothe. And the definition in the psychological diagnostic manuals are basically the repetitive behavior, repeated attempts to stop, not definable by any other condition, and debilitation in the form of, the physical damage of the bald spots from overpulling, or the skin infections from overpicking, or bloody fingernails from over nail biting, that starts to create shame and starts to impede living your best life. That's sort of also, while I say it's a mental health condition, it's also a spectrum of, the person that casually nail bites versus someone who is getting to that point of skin infection, and then they're not going out to see their friends because they don't want to be found out.
So tell me that moment, that interlude where you are picking or doing whatever the behavior is. Could you describe where you go, what that feels like for those that aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, so I pull from my eyelashes and my eyebrows mostly, but I also have a little bit of cheek biting that doesn't cause me too much of that debilitation of that, like, oh no, what if someone sees? What if someone finds out? And a little bit of head hair pulling, kind of when there's one, there's others, but eyebrows and eyelashes are my main one. And from my personal experience and from being in our online community, the understanding that I see and that I experience is that it's kind of like a trance. It's sort of like your subconscious engages in these behaviors as a way to self-soothe, as a way to stay in a range of calm. But then the aftermath creates this like vicious cycle of, oh my God, what did I do? Now I'm back in a state of disequilibrium, and my brain knows that this feels good. Maybe there's that dopamine hit or something going on in the brain where it's like, well, let's do that again because it made me feel good in this moment, right? So there's like this sick cycle of, I don't feel great. I do this behavior. I feel good. I don't feel great because of either what's happening in my environment or what's happening in my own mind. And it's just this vicious cycle.
And actually, that word trance, that caught my attention because that's what it feels like to me. I discussed in our last episode, I have a body picking behavior. I pick my scalp sometimes to the point that it's bleeding and sore, and it's during that moment that it's going on. It feels like it's a relief from the mental busyness and the worry, because it's almost like someone puts my brain in neutral and almost like a zombie like straight. I mean, trance is a perfect word. That word hadn't occurred to me, but that's what it is.
Yeah, and I love how you explain it. Your brain in neutral. That's pretty much it, right? You're neither revving forward nor are you shrieking to a halt, nor, like it's exactly that state of calm.
Yep. Yeah, and you said something also in our last interview that has stuck with me, which is that when you feel the urge, or when you find yourself doing that, that's your subconscious telling you your body needs something that is not being addressed. And could you talk more about that?
Yeah, that's kind of what we've come to understand, is that through the work that I do, that in helping, hundreds of thousands of people with this condition, is that it's a self-soothing mechanism. So then there's a why. Why do you need self-soothing, right? And so for many people it could be stress or anxiety, but it could also be tiredness, it could be boredom, it could be even things in between overwhelm and underwhelm, like physical things like dehydration or having to go to the bathroom or being hungry. And so the way I like to explain it is you've missed the other signals. Like maybe you've missed the rumble in your tummy because you're too busy working on getting that paper done before the 2 p.m. deadline or the 12 a.m. deadline. And you're like, I'm not going to go to sleep until this is done. And these behaviors are kind of serving two purposes. One is to self-soothe, to keep you in that state of calm so you can do what you're doing in the moment, maybe concentrate on that paper, but also they serve as a signal that you've gotten out of imbalance, or you've gotten out of balance rather, and that you do need something healthier to get you back to balance. And so it's that question of, well, what do I need in the moment? So when you meet those needs, then your hands don't need to talk to you anymore.
Okay, perfect. That's actually the next point I was going to bring up, which is this idea that, would you say that in general, people that have these BFRBs are people that are not good at taking care of themselves, loving themselves?
I definitely see this a lot in the community, that we're really hard on ourselves. There's a lot of perfectionism, and I think there's some research behind perfectionism in this community. There's a lot of, like we're so hard on ourselves, right? Like even as a child, I didn't want to tell anyone I was doing this because I thought I was alone and weird and ugly and strange. Those were my words for myself. Those weren't other people's words for myself. right? So absolutely, I feel like there is a lesson in self-love and self-care here that we need to learn.
Yeah, talk about that aloneness again. I definitely understand what you're talking about, but maybe people watching don't get it. But when you list those things, I mean, even your parents, which I know they loved you and you loved them back, but you didn't even share these things with your parents. Truly, as a child, your parents should be your rock. They should be your solace. But this is something you had to even keep from them. So talk a bit about what that made you feel like, and so that other people who feel that way maybe can feel some support from it.
Yeah, and I think it was just fear of judgment, right? It wasn't I couldn't go to them. Like, I think I was just afraid of what they would say because I didn't know what it was. This was the nice. We didn't have internet. We didn't have, these pockets or these things in our pockets that tell us everything that's happening in the world. So it was just a different time of lack of resources, lack of education, lack of knowledge. And so really what we're seeing now is if you don't understand something, you can't be understanding. And so that was the fear, was that I didn't understand it. I wasn't being understanding to myself. How could my parents? And so that was the fear, was like, how could anyone around me help me? Does that make sense? That like it wasn't like I was afraid that they were going to beat me or anything. They loved me. I know they loved me, and I know they would have done whatever they could have, but it just didn't it just didn't seem like it was going to do anything for me. Like,
And there was
what would they
probably
be able to
such
do?
a high level of discomfort that if you played it out in your mind, that even revealing that to your parents, it seems like if you didn't know what it was and you didn't think they would know what it was, it would just be a very unpleasant experience to reveal that secret that you had.
And yeah, and I feel like it would have just made things a little, like a big elephant in the room. And also frankly, I'm, first generation American. My parents are from India, Indian culture. There's a lot of like, what will people think, sort of culture. So a lot of how we live our life is under that lens of, well, what will people think? What will people think if you go to art school instead of business school, right? Like these cultural, like, if you break from culture, if you break from tradition, if you break from what is expected of you. And again, living from a perfectionist standpoint, that's not being perfect. That's not being the good Indian girl. That's not being so, like, it just would have opened a can of worms that yeah.
I get that more than you can possibly understand. I'm actually a first generation American also. I definitely, we don't talk as a family. We never have. So you kind of do what you're supposed to do, make the grades, and just kind of stay out of trouble and play by the rules. You don't talk about your inner life. I mean, I had huge things happen in college. Breakups, and it just I would never dream of going to my parents with that. And I see my now wife, who's American, share everything with her mother and with her daughter. They talk about everything, every little thing. And it has been such a joy to move in that direction myself. If you could talk a little bit about, did you come here as a child or were you born here?
No, I was born in New York. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. But your parents were immigrants.
Yeah. Parents, 1975, they moved here.
Okay. So they probably, I don't know if it's just like natural selection that immigrants that come here are that high powered, but my parents were certainly, my dad was an algebra teacher. My mother was an anesthesiologist. I have lots of relatives that came over that were like that. So I know your parents were very driven from the things that I've read about them. Could you talk a bit about the pressures that growing up as an immigrant child with parents, and you weren't an immigrant, but you were surrounded by people that were first generation Americans. Could you talk a bit about how that affected you and maybe how that contributed to your trichotillomania?
Yeah, I think part of it is just, one of it being physical, Indian, very bushy hair, very bushy eyebrows, growing up in a very Caucasian neighborhood where, again, these kids were like beautiful and perfect, right? In what American standards of beauty and perfection are. So I think I started pulling my eyebrows to tweeze them, to clean them up, right? So that they didn't look so, what I thought was ugly at the time, right? So I think that played a role in it. My parents also worked really hard. Like, my mom worked morning till evening. We didn't really, to your point of like not talking, like, we didn't really see each other. We saw each other for dinner and then we watched TV together. and then we would go to sleep. So there really wasn't, um, like, connection the way that I have connection with my 11 and 8-year-old now, where we're doing lots of things together. It was a different time. Like, they didn't play with me. I sit and do Legos with my kids all the time, right? It's just different. And then just in terms of the immigrant community that we were with, everyone owned their own business. Everyone, I watched my parents and all of my aunties and uncles, which is more of a term of respect than blood relationship, like, go from, you know, almost nothing to really building these lives, these businesses, these families, these, like, seeing them moving on up from Queens to North Shore, Long Island, which, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I saw it around me, and it just kind of absorbed that idea of, like, if I work hard, if I do good, if I do right by whomever I choose to serve, like, that's success.
Yeah, and it's an outward success. Not your inner life really isn't relevant. That's the way it was to me growing up. It was just as long as you're functioning okay and the grades are good, then the rest of it is almost not important. but so what have you? And BFRBs are still, I think, I'm a medical doctor. I deal with not psychiatry, but I have a lot of patients that and because of my interest in meditation and yoga, this is a topic that mental health, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being is something that is very near to my heart. But I still don't see many people talking about BFRB. Could you elaborate maybe if there's one misconception you'd like to clear up about BFRBs that you've discovered in your work over the past, since 2019? What would it be?
There's so many misconceptions. I think the biggest thing is that people think the biggest thing is people think that because it's our hands, it's our choice, it's our fault. And that is not the case. It is not something we sit and choose to do. It's not something that I say, I'm going to pull my hair out right now. It's something that just starts happening in that subconscious reptile autopilot brain because we've gotten off baseline, and the brain is like, like taking in data and saying, we're off balance here. I'm going to do this to get us back. And so it's not a choice in that sense, but we can get to a point where it's a choice. We can get to a point where we have that level of conscious awareness and control to say, okay, actually, you know what? I don't want to be doing this right now. Or, you know what? Right now, I'm in a hard moment. I know what's happening. I know why it's happening. I'm going to pull because I know it's going to make me feel better, but that's it, right? Like, and that's sort of where I am, where I feel like I'm 98% pull free, but 100% shame free and 100% in control, where when I pull, I know it's happening. I know I am choosing to do it. And I know that I'm not going to be upset with myself because I know, like, even in the car ride home from summer camp pickup, I pulled 2 hairs and I was like, oh, yep, okay. I didn't need to do that, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go now do more. I'm going to sip my water, check the time, check the, ETA, and I'm good. I'm not going to be late. So I don't need to feel stressed.
So you said hundreds of thousands. I'm sure that's even under counting, but I'm sure you know that there are people that have this disorder and similar disorders that feel hopeless, that it's just insurmountable, that they need to take psychiatric medications or they need something drastic to happen. But I think the main message I get from you at your work is that you give people hope that it is surmountable, that you can get through it. And I think that's the biggest gift, really, that you gave me, for one thing. You're correct that it's not cured. I still find myself reaching up and picking at my scalp, but it doesn't devastate me. I don't call myself names for doing it anymore. I just think, okay, I just need to tweak this today.
Yeah.
In a loving way, and it's going to be okay. So that's hope, that's, I think, what you give people.
Yeah.
In bounds.
And along the lines of misperceptions, it's that, right? That you're alone, but there's really an estimated 1 in 20 people have this condition, meaning body focused repetitive behaviors, hair pulling, skin picking, nail biting, like some manifestation of this. That's why we call it the most common disorder you've never heard of, because it is, one second.
Little one.
Sorry.
Totally good. Don't worry. Don't worry.
it's called the most common mental health condition you've never heard of. That's how we describe it because of that shame. Nobody wants to talk about it, but really, you're not alone. That's one of the other biggest misconceptions. And then there's another thing to point out there is that I believe recovery is possible for anyone with this condition. I do also believe that it is a spectrum and it may be mild for some people, it may be moderate to heavy for other people. But with the right system of care, you mentioned medication, maybe medication is part of that toolkit. There's not one thing that's going to solve it for you, but you can create a system. And I do think, like you're saying, that, yeah, maybe you still engage in the behavior, but you don't beat yourself up anymore. Like, even just learning that step is going to help you start moving from wherever you on that spectrum to the point of it being, what I do think is the cure, which is 90% in control and 100% 100% shame-free, 100% where it doesn't mess with your head and your sense of self.
Wow. You inspired me when I listened to your TED Talk, and I actually wasn't planning to bring this up, but I have a second thing that I've actually never shared with, my wife literally is the only person on the planet that knows that I do this. So when you said, I'm going to reveal something, a secret about myself, it just made me think, well, what am I not revealing about myself? I have this behavior, which is rolling the corners of pillowcases. And I'm 59 and a half, and I've been doing it as long as I can remember, since I was a child. And I started thinking about, well, that's it, not maybe body focus, but it is, because I get the sensation from my fingers, and it's something that I do. I go unconscious, when I'm stressed, but literally all our pillowcases in the house have the ends worn down, and my wife is so tolerant of it. There's a lot of wives that probably would say, don't stop, that's terrible. I traced it back to a trauma that happened when I was between 2 and 3, where I was living with I won't go into all the detail, but my grandmother was my primary caretaker. My parents were living abroad. I was in Iran, and they had sent me back home because they couldn't take care of me. They were both working. And so when I was about 3, they finally came home. And up to that point, I built this very tight bond with my grandmother. And because she was my mother's mother-in-law, this wall came down when they came home, because my mother was quite jealous of her. And so I was not allowed to utter her name. I was not allowed to see her. So basically I went from having this warm person that I felt was nourishing and loving to me, to not even being able to talk to her, just in an instant. And this went on for years, until maybe like age 18, 19, finally, when she was close to death in Iran. I was living in Tennessee, and I was having a conversation with her, and they're 8 hours different, so and my mother was standing next to me, and I could see when I was talking to my grandmother that there was this moment where my mother was looking at me. I was talking to my grandmother overseas, and I knew if I didn't tell my grandmother I loved her, that may be the last opportunity. And so I said, I love you in Farsi, man shoma dost daram. And I know that my mother, I could feel her bristling, but I said that to my grandmother, and that was the first time I'd openly showed love for my grandmother in front of my mother, since I was 2, Yeah. So when I trace back that pill rolling thing, I think it started around that point, because I don't ever remember doing it around my grandmother. It was when I was home by myself, and the overwhelming emotion for me was being alone and isolated, and in this strange house with these strange people that I didn't have any bond with, but I completely was dependent on them. So that when you say alone and isolated, that really, really rings true. So to this day, that's a behavior. I've not really tried to quit it, but there are times I know that the more stressed I am, the more I do that. So does that qualify as a BFRB?
So one, I just want to hold space for you, because that's like that little baby. Like, I want to give you a hug so bad, because like we sometimes, and I'm a parent now, and we don't sometimes really understand the pain that we're creating for our babies, like we've got our own issues that we're bringing. So I just want to just hold space for that, because you went from safety and security to the opposite, and your parents probably didn't see it that way, because they're like, but you're our child, right? Like, how can you not feel? But they didn't have the bond with you and that bond was broken. And so again, I'm not a treatment professional, so I don't know, like, understanding what I know of BFRBs, I can see that that was a coping mechanism. Like, that I understand. I can equate it to that. Can we say it's a BFRB? I mean, even the term BFRB is only 40 years old. So, you know, we can probably start doing what we want with it, and if we can get research behind it, right? That we as a community can influence what this thing is and how it's treated and all of that. But ultimately, yes, it's a coping mechanism. It's something that if you can trace it back to, you know, a trauma, whether it's a big T trauma or a little T trauma, I mean, something like that, right? At 18 years old happening to you may not cause trauma, but at 2 or 3, of course, that's going to be a bond breaking and something happening in your mind-body connection at that moment in time, right? Like, you're getting ripped away from love, and it being what they thought in the moment was also moving from one love to another love. But if we don't, this is why, like, parents play such an important role in their children's mental health, and we don't even know it. We don't even know what thing is going to be the thing that may or may not impact them, because we ourselves are still trying to understand who they are as children, right? Like, for you, maybe, like, I'm thinking back to my own sister. My parents moved to the US in 1975. They left my 3-month-old sister with my Masi, my mom's sister, my aunt. I know it in Hindi, but I don't know it in English. And so she was there with them, and my mom tells us when we went to go pick up your sister, she didn't want to come to me, right? Because the bond wasn't there.
Right, exactly.
Now, my sister and me, we've grown up, we are completely different. She is so strong. She is so, like, I admire her so much for her ability to know who she is. For the longest time, she's always known, kind of thing. And me, I was like a mess my entire first 40 years of my life. And, you know, spoiler alert, I'm still in my 40s. I'm just starting to figure it out. Like, I feel like I'm a little child just finally understanding. So, you know, when you talk about rolling a pillowcase corner, at some point, does it matter? Right? As long as you're feeling safe in the moment, as long as it's not hurting anyone else, right? As long as it's not a bother or it's creating that vicious cycle in your own brain of like, oh my God, I did it again, then let it help you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. You're very good at letting that space occur. And actually, your TED Talk today, I wanted to ask you, there was a moment where it was kind of midway through the talk where you stopped and said, everyone, let's take a breath together. Could you tell me what you were feeling during that moment and why you did that?
I was probably feeling like I needed a breath. It was also part of the story that I was trying to tell, that we are always, like, hang on one second. So the reason I asked the audience to take that breath was, it was part of the story I wanted to tell, that we grow up with soothing mechanisms that may or may not be good for us. But if we can learn healthy soothing mechanisms like deep breathing, like you can see I'm turning to drink my water every little bit. If we can learn and if we can teach our younger generations these healthier soothing mechanisms, then all the other ways of coping, you know, I think I alluded to eating too much or smoking or drinking or hair pulling, which was mine, that if we can learn to self-soothe in healthy ways, then the brain can rely less and less on all these unhealthy ways. And so in taking that deep breath, I just wanted to show them that it's possible.
Yep. Absolutely. You also, there was another moment that kind of stuck out for me in your talk, and I may be reading into this, but the first half of your talk, you were very emotional and you were in tears, part of it. You kept pressing on. There was a moment when you shifted into talking about the Keen device, and it seemed like the emotion kind of left you for a little while you were talking about that device. I wonder, and this didn't occur to me until I had one on my wrist and I used it for a while. It's the Keen device is software driven. It's very technical. It's a cold electronic device. You are, with everything that you do and the work that you do, it's very human, deeply emotional, heartfelt work. how do you mesh those two things? Because the solution that you've come up with is it's a it's a piece of hardware. You've managed to use that. But tell me, and I noticed that same transition in your talk. You went into that, the talking about the Keen, and it was a very methodical, almost like, someone in a Silicon Valley company talking about their device. And then you shifted back to the way you were before. Tell me, is that a thing? Am I reading into that?
So that, I think, is just like, that's not premeditated. Like, I'm going to cry here and I'm going to be strong and, and more techie here. That's just me. Like, I still get very emotional when I talk about losing. That is just, I'm an empath. Like, I don't even know. I mean, even just now when you're sharing your story, I'm trying to hold back tears, right? Like, I am an emotional being. We are all emotional beings. When you talk about a device like this, like, we believe love is the answer. When we meet our needs, we are showing ourselves love. Love is the answer, but we can't show ourselves love if we're not aware. And so awareness is part of that equation as well. And that's what the device brings. And we actually even call it our hug on the wrist. That vibration, when it's vibrating, we call it the hug on the wrist, right? So we are trying to bring that humanness to this robotic world we live in. And that's actually why I started just recently. Like, I used to write every single email that went out the door, and it was me writing them. And then, as we've grown as a small team, like, okay, there's some things I need to pass on so that I can go build the business and be part of the other discussions that we're having and other work that needs to be done. But just recently, maybe like 2 or 3 months ago, I decided I want to go back to writing to this community, because it is that human connection that is so much a part of the healing process, the community that we're building. And so I try to, every week, like tomorrow, I call it Thoughtful Thursday. So every Thursday I write whatever is on my mind in that moment. And that is how we kind of balance the hard, cold, technical aspect with the personal touch and the love that we believe is so important to the recovery journey.
I think you may have answered the next question I had, which was, you started from a place of anxiety, shyness. You talk about that a lot. You talk about the shame of this behavior, and you have transformed that into almost a superpower, it seems. So you shifted that, and now I think you leverage it to help and to give all these other people support. Could you talk about that shift, that Aikido move that you made, going from a place of shyness and keeping secrets to putting yourself out in front of the world, and why you did that, and just talk about that, because I think that's a powerful part of your.
Yeah. Well, wow. See, like, I cry all the time. Like, as you say this, I'm like, whoosh, memories back of hiding behind my parents as a kid, right? Like, I was the shy kid. I was the kid that refused to speak. I was the kid that had like a chorus solo during the assembly, and at the last minute I'm like crying to my teacher, I don't want to sing, and then the next time she gives me a speaking part, and all of a sudden again I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. Like, fear, shame, judgment, all of that stuff is what I lived with for so long. I don't know how I've been able to flip it. I think it's in stopping running, stopping hiding. Once you stop, you can start becoming who you really are. Because, I was hiding at different points in my life. I was hiding that I was engaging in this behavior, but that also then meant I had to hide in other ways, right? Like, I was afraid to go out for the basketball team because I was afraid if I, wiped my eyebrows with the sweat, then people would see all of that they were gone. And so I then hid my joy for basketball. I hid, I stopped playing basketball. I stopped watching basketball. I stopped, then you lose these parts of you. But when you start letting go and you stop caring what other people think and you start facing your pain instead of running from it, I feel like that's the path. And I think that's what's been helped me build that strength to no longer be shy.
I have a suggestion or at least I have an inkling. You can tell me if it's accurate. But, Jordan Peterson says that self-consciousness is indistinguishable psychologically from anxiety and depression. And what he means by that is the more you think about yourself, the more you think about how you're presenting to other people, or the more you're obsessed with the impression you're making, the more upset, anxious, and depressed you are. So I have an idea that maybe one of the ways that you shifted as you have in the past decade or two is because you shifted away from yourself and you started thinking about others. I mean, your entire online presence now is how you're helping everyone else around you. And do you think there's any truth in that?
100%. I think that was exactly where I was going to go next. Was part of it is because of that, right? That there are very few people willing to talk about these things. And if one person hears my story, they feel seen. They can then start chipping away at the shame that they're holding on to. They can start seeing that hope is possible, that recovery is possible, like we were talking about up front, right? And so it's not, there's a reason, right? That in the past, when I was a kid, then I was, you're going to go on stage and you're going to go sing that song, or you're going to go say that line. It was not for other people, if that makes sense. Like, it was for, like, it wasn't, I didn't want to do it, like, I can't explain it. Let me see. I want to get this. There's something here that, shifting from being shy and ashamed to now being outspoken about this condition it's because I've seen what that shift can do for other people. Meaning my shift can do for other people.
Yes, I get it.
If I can speak up, then now someone hears that. And you can go to the TEDx and you can see those comments that now they have a little inkling of bravery to say, okay, I'm going to go tell my mom about this, or I'm going to go research it. I'm going to go try to understand. And there's like a reason behind why I speak, why I talk, why I want people to know my journey, because I know that there's lessons in there. And I actually just did a mental health panel this earlier today, and someone else on the panel mentioned they had asked a question about balance, and I had brought up that in 2022 I had breast cancer, and that was the breaking point of me figuring out how to start bringing balance to my life through my values work and through recognizing I was doing way too much. I had to just cut everything off that wasn't my health and my work and my kids so that I could heal and get better. And someone had mentioned on the panel, like, sometimes you just have to hit that rock bottom in order to make change in your life. And my hope is that if I can share my story, maybe it will help someone start changing their life without having to hit that rock bottom.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Not everyone will get it, but even if one person gets it,
right, then it's worth it.
Right. And I sense that you're not, and when you get those comments on your website, and I think I sent you one of those emails thanking you. I don't think you take that comment and think, oh, look how great Anila is. I think you feel joy about seeing your actions actually make other people's lives better. That's a wholly different thing. You're not doing this for your ego.
100%. It's actually like, yes, to the person that's writing in. You did it, right? You did it. We just unlocked a door and you walked through it. And that's what it is. Like, the answers are within us. We're just trying to help people get it out of them.
Yeah, and it is not just about BFRB. I think you get that, and we talked about that in our last interview. But BFRB is a starting point, and if you use that as a jump off point towards learning how to care for yourself, learning how to appear more authentic, or to actually be more authentic, be more true to who you are and not be so afraid about what other people think. If you think about, the BFRB, it's a beautiful potential learning opportunity, to get to that point of authenticity. You said, I decided I'm just going to let go of control over what people think of me. I think that you just used those words. That's an important point, that the moment that you let go of that tight control over, you say, well, if someone sees my eyebrows not there, You know, that if you get to that point, that is an incredibly empowering thing. And it makes the BFRB less necessary, I think.
And less powerful in your life.
Yes, you're taking the power out of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the framework that we use for these subconscious hand movements is, I sign off every email with love, strength, and awareness, like wishing you love, strength, and awareness, because I believe it's those three things. We talked about awareness, we talked about love, but it's backwards. It's the awareness to summon the strength to pause and choose love. We are moving so fast in this world. Everything we do, we are moving so fast that we are not conscious. We are not aware. Like I could get my kids to summer camp and not know exactly how it happened because my
That's
brain
right.
is elsewhere, right? My brain is thinking about, okay, as soon as I drop them off, I'm gonna go hunker down at this coffee shop. I gotta do this, and then boom, I'm at the drop off point because it's all automatic. Like we are not robots, but we act robotically in a
Mm,
lot of ways.
right. Actually, you might be interested in the last interview I did, just one podcast episode before you, which was with a guy named Andrew Laubacher, who basically believes in disconnecting from digital media. And he's a young guy. He's I think in his 30s, but he basically threw away his smartphone back in 2018. And now he's a crusader for he calls it digital detox. And so one of the things that is certainly not helpful is all just the influx of information and the things pulling you away, and a lot of it's quite intentional. Your smartphone constantly is pulling you away. And so anyway, just to plug that last interview I did, you might find it useful. So if we are closing in on an hour here, and I don't want to take too much of your time, I have a few other things I want to discuss. And I think we need to just sit and have coffee for a few hours and talk. But if this is time for you to think crazy and think big, if you could take on a totally new human struggle, maybe even one outside of mental health, above and beyond what Keen and Habit Aware does, what would it be?
My God, world struggle. I feel like there are so many world struggles right now. We're living in a time where I believe it's all happening for a reason. I believe that it's kind of like this bubbling up of all this stuff that we've pushed down for so long that it needs to come to the surface so that we can deal with it.
It's okay. It's okay. That's amazingly cute, actually.
I think that there's a lot happening right now. And I think we're living in a time where there is a conscious awakening, and there are still a lot of people that are living in subconscious mode. And I think maybe that awakening, that spiritual awakening, that reconnection of mind, body, soul, because I think right now what I see is you're this, you're that, you can check these boxes off as a human being. You can check these boxes off as a human being. And there's your people over there, and there's your people over there. And we're missing the point that we're all spirit. We're all human. We're all the same. And I think that that's where I kind of want to move to eventually, is like, how do we start seeing each other for the energy within ourselves, not for the casing that we are in?
That's very powerful. That's kind of my mission too. And that's why I do these interviews with people that pop up in my life that I think get it. And you're certainly one of those people. But I see when I see someone like yourself, and I have lots of friends that people who probably think are eccentric or unusual, but I see a light inside them, and I immediately identify and I understand that that's somebody that's awake. And I think part of being awake is understanding that this separation that we put, where our body ends, it's me, and then the rest of it's something else, and then there's you. All that's an illusion. We all come from the same place. We're all going to the same place.
We're all
I think,
source from the same source, right?
Yeah.
And I think that conscious awakening is happening. Like you can find those Instagram feeds and get into that world. And that's how I've curated my feed, right? Is that like there are so many people that are raising their vibrations and seeing beyond just what we look like and how we talk and what we do for a living. And I think that's where eventually my hope is that's where we wind up. Will I be here to see that? I don't know, but hopefully I'll be part of that
Well, you are. You are doing that. I don't have any doubt about that. Where do you think Habit Aware is going to be 20 years from now? What do you envision for that company, and what else are you getting into other than if there is anything outside of mental health or outside of BFRB?
Yeah, so to grow the company, we are focusing on kind of our what we know, like this power of awareness is paramount. Like a lot of mental health issues stem from lack of understanding that those thoughts are not really us, right? Like those thoughts are just thoughts. Those thoughts are just fear. Those thoughts are just like are trying to keep us safe, but sometimes they go awry. So we're looking at ways for adapting the technology for other conditions where awareness is that key to unlocking the behavior change. So we actually have a partnership with American Printing House for the Blind, which is a nonprofit that serves blind and visually impaired. And we've developed a version of the bracelet that can detect compulsive eye pressing, which
Mm.
is a very common behavior in the visually impaired community. And what happens is, even though there's some visual impairment there, that when someone excessively pushes on their eyes, it can further damage the optical nerves, making it even more visual impairment. It can potentially lead to like the eyes being pushed back in the eye sockets. And so there's some of that like disfigurement conditioning, that condition there that we're trying to help prevent. And just, the social aspect, which that's the where I kind of get like, well, who's to say what's culturally acceptable? But that's what we live in a day and age where, yeah, you don't want to be picking your nose in public kind of thing, right?
Uh-huh.
So we're helping people from that perspective. Then we also have a research grant with the University of Minnesota to adapt the technology for like overeating awareness. And
Mm.
so those are kind of the ways that we're looking at, not just the bracelet, but now also, okay, what other technology can we use? Hardware plus software plus human touch can we use to serve communities that don't have a lot of resources, or maybe they do, but they're just inaccessible because of, lack of access to care. So
Yep.
those are, yeah.
Boy, that eating thing is actually, that is very intriguing. I think there's huge potential for that. And I don't know if I mentioned to you, I'm actually a pediatric ophthalmologist. That when you're talking about people grinding on their eyes, I've seen people lose their eyes from that, actually. They damage their eyes to the point where they get a corneal ulcer and infection, and it definitely can be very serious. Is there anything, I'm trying to think, I want to make sure I've covered at least the things that I was shooting to cover. We covered more, actually. Is there anything we left off that you'd like to talk about?
Could talk with you all day long. I mean, these are the conversations that I live for. I'm always trying to find people who are down to talk like
Yeah, yeah.
spirituality and awareness and manifestation and just the power of our minds, right? And like the power that we have in here. And it's actually apparent in the fact that we have a BFRB. It's just the power has been switched to like the bad side, the dark side. But how do we turn it to light? How do we learn to use all that power that's in there with awareness to summon the strength, to choose love so that we are taking care of ourselves? And then that ripple effect, like you were saying before, that this system works for overthinking, it works for parenting, it works for, even driving in traffic, that if you can slow down and choose to choose love, right? In the moment, I mean, if more of us did that, we'd be living in a very different world.
I agree. That's a very powerful message and maybe a great place to end. I think you're 100% right about that. And making the choice of love when, the default is not that. The default is fear and defensiveness and, the hoarding things. And, our culture is not built to think of love first, but that is a transformational message. Appreciate you saying that. How can folks get a hold of you? How can they contact?
You can find us at habitaware.com. You can email me at anila@habitaware.com. We are on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. I feel like I'm missing one. All at Habit. I'm on Instagram at Anila Idnani. Yeah, come say hi. It's me in the DMs. So would love to chat with anyone for whom this talk resonated. And if we can help you, that would be an even more of a bonus.
Fantastic. Again, I appreciate so much talking with you, and perhaps someday we'll meet in person and we can continue this conversation. This has been a great talk, great conversation. Really appreciate it. And if you guys out there who are watching and listening, if you gained something from this, if it was inspirational to you, feel free to click the like button. You can follow us. We do Apple Podcasts and also on YouTube. And let me know what you think. Anila, I'm going to say goodbye. And again, thank you so much. I know you need to get back to your kids, that we've enjoyed listening to them for part of this podcast. Thank you again. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much for having me.